Alex stares at Zixmar's mandibles clicking just inches from their face. "We survived because we adapted," Alex replies, keeping their voice steady despite the intimidation. "Humans don't have natural armor or multiple limbs, so we built tools instead of becoming our weapons." The Arthropodian retreats slightly, head tilting in what might be confusion or curiosity. Interesting philosophy. Flawed, but interesting. The dormitory's environmental controls adjust with a hiss, the temperature dropping to accommodate Drock's silicon biology. The massive Magnite lounges on a reinforced bed platform, crystalline growths on his shoulders catching the dim light. The archives say humans fought each other more than any external threat. He rumbles, voice like stones grinding together. How did a species so intent on self-destruction ever achieve space travel? Alex unpacks a small holographic projector from Earth, placing it on the central table. It activates, displaying a timeline of human history. Because we learned from our mistakes. After our last global conflicts, we realized we needed to channel our ingenuity toward exploration rather than destruction. The hologram shifts to show Earth's first interstellar vessel. When we met the Proxima Coalition, we were outmatched technologically, but we offered something they hadn't seen before, innovative solutions to problems they hadn't even recognized. Elindra floats closer, her luminescent form pulsing with skeptical colors. "Yet you barely survived that encounter. Our records show your homeworld would have been conquered if not for a strategic error on their part." "Not an error," Alex corrects gently. "A choice. We showed them that conquering Earth would cost more than cooperating with us. We couldn't match their weapons, but we could offer alternatives worth more than another subjugated planet. The human gestures to their modest belongings. That's why I'm here. Not to learn how to build better weapons, but to show there are other paths to security." The door slides open with a pneumatic hiss, interrupting their conversation. A tall avian figure with iridescent feathers and a ceremonial sash enters. "Orientation tour begins in 10 minutes, she announces, her translator giving her voice a musical quality. "All first cycle students must attend." Her 4 eyes scan the room, lingering disapprovingly on Alex. "Human Chen, you have failed to synchronize your personal chronometer with Academy Standard Time." Alex fumbles with the unfamiliar wristband, the alien tech refusing to respond properly to human bioelectrical signals. Zixmar skitters forward, a manipulator limb adjusting the device with practiced ease. "There. Now you won't embarrass our dormitory by being late to every session." His mandibles click in what might be amusement, though you'll probably find new ways to embarrass us soon enough. As they file out into the corridor, Alex notices other student groups keeping their distance, whispers and translated murmurs following them. "Is it always like this?" Alex asks quietly. "We represent the 4 most disparate biologies in our cohort," Elindra explains, her telepathic voice tinged with resignation. "The administrators deliberately group incompatible species together during first cycle. Those who survive the experience without incident advance to specialized training." "Survive." Alex swallows hard. "That's just an expression, right?" Drock's crystalline laugh echoes down the hallway. "Last cycle, 23 students failed to complete their first assessment. 3 expired from their injuries. But don't worry, human," Zixmar adds, mandibles flexing into what might be a smile. "We'll protect our dormitory standing, even if we have to carry your primitive species through the assessments ourselves." As they enter the grand atrium for the tour, Alex realizes the challenge ahead is far greater than anticipated. It isn't just about proving humanity's worth. It's about surviving in an institution designed to break even the strongest species in the galaxy. Looking up at the imposing statues of past graduates, each depicted with the legendary weapons they created, Alex wonders if there's room among them for someone who believes the greatest innovation isn't a better way to destroy, but a better reason to create. The dormitory falls into uncomfortable silence after Alex's declaration about adaptable solutions. Drock finally breaks it by cracking his stone-like knuckles, tiny crystals raining onto the floor. Theory means nothing here, human. Only results matter at the Academy. Alex opens a tablet, displaying research from the archives. That's exactly my point. Look at the 7th Galactic conflict. The Hive's worm dominated 3 sectors with superior firepower until the Luminarites deployed communication disruptors rather than trying to match their weapons. Elindra's skin pulses with reluctant interest. My ancestors did achieve victory through unconventional means, she admits, hovering closer to examine Alex's research. But that was strategic doctrine, not weapons design. The distinction isn't as clear as you think. Alex replies, swiping to a new display showing historical weapons progression across species. Every major technological breakthrough came when someone stopped trying to make marginally better versions of existing weapons and instead approached problems differently. Zixmar chittered, mandibles clicking rapidly. Fine words, but Professor Kandera doesn't grade philosophy. She grades weapons that function in multiple environments. What exactly do you plan to build, human? Alex finally smiles, pulling out sketches unlike anything the aliens have seen before. Something that can become what you need, when you need it. The diagrams show a device with modular components, adaptive materials, and mechanical systems that can reconfigure based on user input. Primitive mechanics, scoffs Strock, though his crystalline eyes linger on the designs longer than necessary. No plasma conduits, no quantum entanglement, no gravitational manipulation. Because those all require massive power sources or specialized environments. Alex explains, adding notes to the design. This relies on basic physical principles that work anywhere: leverage, stored mechanical energy, material properties. It doesn't need charging or fuel. It won't be enough, Elindra warns, her telepathic voice tinged with what might be concern. The assessment requires demonstration of offensive capability in 3 different environments. The Academy doesn't recognize clever as a substitute for deadly. The next morning, the fabrication lab is already humming with activity when Alex arrives. Students from across the galaxy work at specialized stations, some manipulating plasma fields with multiple appendages, others communing telepathically with quantum computers, still others submersing themselves in tanks of exotic fluids to shape molecular structures with their thoughts. Professor Kandera moves between workstations, her tentacles efficiently manipulating controls while her multiple eyes assess progress. When she reaches Alex's assigned space, her tentacles freeze mid-motion. Human Chen, you requested no specialized equipment. Just basic fabricators and materials, Professor, Alex confirms, arranging simple tools on the workbench. Interesting. Her eyes blink in sequence, a sign of suspicion. The last assessment cycle, a Proximan student attempted something similar. His remains were returned to his Hivequeen in 17 separate containers. Alex swallows hard. What happened? His simple device lacked sufficient offensive capability against a Class 3 combat drone. Kandera's tentacles ripple with something like amusement. The demonstration was quite educational for the surviving students. As she glides away, Zixmar skitters over from his workstation, mandibles clicking quietly. Not too late to change your approach, human. His voice lacks its usual mocking tone. Kandera wasn't exaggerating. The assessment drones are programmed to respond with escalating force until either they or the weapon neutralizes the threat. I'm counting on that programming. Alex replies, sketching modifications to the design. Combat drones follow predictable patterns. They expect direct confrontation and escalate accordingly. And what will your little tool do against a drone designed to withstand plasma weapons and gravitational distortion? Alex looks up, expression determined. Nothing. Until it doesn't have to. Before the confused arthropodian can respond, Alex adds, sometimes the best way to win a fight is to change what winning means. Zixmar's mandibles click in what might be laughter or concern. You're either brilliantly innovative or suicidally naive. I'm genuinely curious to discover which. He extends a manipulator appendage, offering a small crystalline component. Quantum stabilizer. might help with your calibration issues. He glances around to ensure no one notices this unexpected assistance. Consider it an investment in making our dormitory's failure slightly less embarrassing. Alex works through the night cycle, hands moving with practiced precision despite the exhaustion. The quantum stabilizer from Zixmar proves surprisingly compatible with the design, allowing for smoother transitions between configurations. As artificial dawn breaks through the workshop's skylight, casting rainbow refractions through the crystalline architecture, Alex finally steps back to examine the prototype. The metallic rod seems unremarkable at first glance. Just 30 centimeters of polished alloy with subtle grooves along its surface. Alex runs a thumb along these patterns, and the device responds, extending telescopically and unfolding a series of precision tools from hidden compartments. Impressive mechanics for such primitive materials. Comes a melodic voice from behind. Alex turns to find an unfamiliar species observing the work, a being composed of interlocking geometric shapes that shift and realign as it moves closer. Its identification badge marks it as Professor Xaltis, instructor of theoretical applications. Thank you, Professor. I'm incorporating principles from multiple Earth disciplines. Alex begins. I'm aware of your species approach. Xaltis interrupts, a pyramid-shaped head rotating to examine the prototype from multiple angles. Elegant solutions using limited resources. The question remains whether elegance will survive contact with a combat drone programmed to terminate threats. Alex demonstrates a particular configuration where the tool extends into what resembles a shield. It's not about matching force with force, but adapting to. Adaptation requires time, Xaltis observes, geometric components rearranging into what might be the equivalent of crossed arms. Combat rarely affords such luxury. Before Alex can respond, alarms blare throughout the workshop. Students rush to secure volatile materials as announcement echoes. Emergency preparedness drill. All prototype weapons to be secured. Atmospheric containment protocols initiated. Air pressure fluctuates as massive vents open along the ceiling, simulating decompression. Students with environmental vulnerabilities activate personal protection fields or retreat to designated safe zones. Alex watches as Zixmar's chidness exoskeleton flexes, special breathing apertures closing to conserve oxygen. With practiced movements, Alex configures the multi-tool into an emergency respirator, the device forming a perfect seal around nose and mouth. A secondary function deploys a thin film that covers exposed skin, protecting against the rapidly dropping temperature. Professor Xaltis observes with geometric features rearranging into what might be surprise. You anticipated environmental hazards rather than combat scenarios. In survival situations, the environment is often a deadlier enemy than any opponent, Alex explains through the respirator. On Earth, more explorers died from exposure than from predators or hostile tribes. The drill ends as abruptly as it began. Systems normalize, and students return to their projects. Xaltis lingers at Alex's station. Interesting perspective. Not standard academy doctrine, but interesting. The professor's components shift into a configuration Alex hasn't seen before. The assessment metrics prioritize offensive capability, but survival under adverse conditions earns supplementary points. After Xaltis departs, Elindra drifts over, her luminescence dimmed to avoid drawing attention. The professor spoke to you directly. Xaltis rarely acknowledges first-cycle students. Just offering criticism of my approach, Alex says, continuing calibrations. No. Elindra's telepathic voice carries an unmistakable note of surprise. That configuration is Xaltis's expression of intellectual curiosity. The professor finds your work worthy of consideration. As if to counterbalance this unexpected development, Grand Marshal Vrex Calter chooses that moment to conduct an inspection of the workshop. His reptilian gaze sweeps over projects with practiced assessment, scales shifting color to indicate approval or disappointment. When he reaches Alex's station, his scales darken to nearly black. Explain, he commands, gesturing at the multi-tool with a clawed hand. Alex demonstrates several configurations, showing how the tool adapts to different scenarios. The Marshal's expression remains unreadable. You believe this will survive against assault drones calibrated to withstand weapons from 17 different species? He finally asks. With respect, Marshal. Alex replies carefully. Surviving against the drones isn't the assignment. Demonstrating advantage in 3 environments is. Vrexkalter's scales ripple with an emotion Alex can't interpret. Semantics will not shield you from plasma fire, human. He leans closer, voice lowering. But precision of thought might yet prove useful. We shall see. The assessment hall falls into stunned silence as Alex continues demonstrating the multi-tool's capabilities. For each new scenario the evaluation panel presents, the human adapts the device to address the challenge, not through overwhelming force, but through ingenious reconfiguration. For toxic atmosphere environments, announces Senior Evaluator Thrix, a gelatinous being whose translucent body houses visible organs, demonstrate countermeasures against airborne molecular corrosives. Without hesitation, Alex twists the multi-tool, extending a sensor array that analyzes the composition of the test gases released into a sealed chamber. The tool then reconfigures into a filtration system that selectively neutralizes the harmful compounds while preserving breathable elements. Impressive, murmurs Evaluator Thrix, tendrils undulating with interest. But environmental adaptation alone does not satisfy assessment requirements. Demonstrate offensive capability. A heavily armored combat drone detaches from the ceiling, hovering menacingly above the test chamber. Its weapon systems power up with an ominous hum, targeting arrays locking onto Alex's position. The audience leans forward, many expecting, perhaps hoping, to witness the human's failure. Even those who had shown marginal interest in the multi-tool concept clearly believe it will prove inadequate against a direct threat. Alex stands calmly as the drone advances. Offensive capability doesn't necessarily mean destructive power, the human explains, fingers dancing across the multi-tool surface. The device extends into what appears to be a simple rod with a reflective tip. The drone fires a concentrated energy burst. Before the audience can register what's happening, Alex positions the multi-tool to redirect the beam back at the drone's sensor array. The precision of the reflection blinds the drone's targeting systems, causing it to stutter mid-air. As the machine recalibrates, Alex configures the tool into a different form, an electromagnetic pulse generator that disrupts the drone's control circuits just long enough to force a system reset. The drone is still functional, protests one evaluator, a multi-limbed insectoid whose mandibles click with disapproval. Because destruction wasn't necessary, Alex counters, approaching the now docile machine. I've accessed its control systems. The multi-tool extends a data probe, interfacing with the drone's access port. It now recognizes me as a non-threat and will accept basic commands. To demonstrate, Alex directs the drone to perform a series of maneuvers around the chamber, culminating in a perfect landing at the human's feet. This violates assessment parameters, hisses a reptilian evaluator, scales flushing with agitation. The objective was to neutralize the threat, which I did. Alex points out, by redefining the relationship between threat and target. A neutralized enemy who becomes an ally is more valuable than a destroyed one. Professor Xaltis, observing from a geometric configuration that suggests intense focus, rearranges into what Alex now recognizes as approval. The parameters specified tactical advantage in 3 environments. Control of enemy systems certainly qualifies as advantageous. Grand Marshal Vrexkalter rises from his observation position, silencing the murmuring audience. His scales shift through several colors before settling into an unfamiliar pattern. Human Chen has satisfied the technical requirements of the assessment, he pronounces, voice heavy with reluctance. Through unconventional methodology. He approaches the demonstration floor, towering over Alex. Tell me, human, If your opponent were not a programmable drone, but a living combatant intent on your destruction, would your approach prove as effective? Would you still refuse to employ lethal force? The question hangs in the air, a challenge that extends beyond the assessment itself. The audience waits, the silence stretching uncomfortably. With respect, Marshal, Alex replies, meeting the reptilian's gaze steadily. In my species' history, our most complete victories weren't won by destroying our enemies, but by turning them into allies. The multi-tool represents that philosophy. It can destroy if necessary, but its real power lies in creating alternatives to destruction. Vrexculter's scales ripple in what might be amusement or irritation. A philosopher's answer. He turns to address the assembly. The assessment requirements have been met. Whether such philosophy has place in galactic conflict remains to be seen. The Academy's central dining hall, a vast chamber with tables arranged by species dietary requirements, buzzes with animated discussion. Alex's assessment performance has become the primary topic of debate, with opinion sharply divided between traditionalists who consider it a mockery and progressives intrigued by the novel approach. Alex sits alone at a small table designed for oxygen breathers, picking at unfamiliar food synthesized to approximate Earth cuisine. The isolation doesn't last long. An unexpected shadow falls across the table as Drak sets his crystalline mass down opposite Alex, his reinforced chair creaking under his weight. Your performance has caused quite the disruption. The Magnite rumbles, his voice like distant thunder. Some senior weapons specialists are calling for a revision of assessment parameters to explicitly require destructive capability. Before Alex can respond, Elindra materializes beside them, her luminescent form pulsing with energetic colors. Others are reviewing historical combat footage to determine if your approach has practical applications in actual warfare. She doesn't sit. Her species rarely does, but hovers at table height. Professor Xaltis has requested permission to form a study group exploring adaptive technology, which makes our dormitory the center of unwanted attention, adds Zixmar, skittering up the wall and onto the ceiling above their table, his preferred dining position. Some students from combat-dominant species are suggesting you received preferential treatment. Alex looks up at the arthropodian. Is that why you destroyed my prototype? The accusation hangs in the air. Drak and Elindra turn to Zixmar, whose mandibles freeze mid-movement. You knew. Zixmar finally asks, compound eyes shifting rapidly. I found one of your scales among the debris. Alex answers calmly. And the sabotage required someone with exceptional dexterity and knowledge of molecular disassembly. Drak's crystalline structure darkens with what might be anger. You violated dormitory honor. He rumbles at Zixmar. Sabotage is the action of those who cannot compete fairly. I did what many were thinking. Zixmar defends, mandibles clicking rapidly. My clan has produced weapons designers for 7 generations. The human makes mockery of our traditions with toys that refuse to destroy. Yet you helped rebuild it. Elindra observes, her telepathic voice rippling with curiosity. I sensed your conflicted thoughts. Your pride demanded the human fail, yet something else made you offer assistance afterward. Zixmar drops from the ceiling onto the table, an unusually vulnerable position for his species. The quantum stabilizer was an apology. I expected the human to report the sabotage, to demand justice. Instead, Alex rebuilt, improved. His mandibles click softly. My species values adaptation above all. We evolved to survive the harshest environments. Yet we became so focused on building better ways to kill that we forgot why we began building in the first place. Alex reaches out, placing a hand near, but not touching, one of Zixmar's appendages. On Earth, we have a saying, necessity is the mother of invention. We created weapons when necessary, but our greatest innovations came from building tools that helped us survive and thrive. Their conversation is interrupted as Academy alerts blare through the hall. The holographic display at the center of the room activates, showing a massive stellar prominence erupting from the system's sun. "Attention all personnel," announces the automated system. "Radiation surge imminent. Proceed to designated shelter areas." This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Students and faculty rise in practiced motions, moving toward reinforced sections of the academy. Alex notices Rex Calter and senior staff gathering near a tactical display, their expressions grim even across alien features. "The radiation shielding should protect us," Drock states, his crystalline body naturally resistant to such threats. "It's not just radiation," Elindra whispers, her form dimming with concern. "I'm sensing fear from the command staff. Something else is happening." Alex looks back at the tactical display just as the lights flicker ominously. "Whatever it is, I think we're about to find out." The academy trembles as another power surge ripples through its systems. Emergency lighting casts eerie shadows across panicked faces of a dozen different species. Alex and Elindra navigate through a corridor where artificial gravity fluctuates wildly, causing lighter beings to float momentarily before crashing back to the floor. The central control hub is 3 sections ahead. Elindra projects into Alex's mind, her luminescent form providing much-needed light in the darkened passage. But the security bulkheads have sealed, standard protocol during catastrophic system failures. Alex studies the sealed doorway ahead, running fingers along its seamless surface. These are designed to withstand weapons fire, the human muses reconfiguring the multi-tool into a diagnostic scanner. But they still need to interface with the central system. The tool extends a probe that connects with a nearly invisible access port. Holographic displays flicker to life, showing scrolling code in an alien programming language. "Can you read this?" Alex asks, stepping back. Elindra pulses with concentration. "Partially. It's requiring command authorization to override emergency protocols." Her light dims slightly. "None of us have such clearance." Alex smiles, adjusting the multi-tool again. "We don't need to override the protocols. We just need to convince the system we're part of the emergency response." The device projects a complex signal pattern that mimics official emergency transponders. After 10 seconds, the bulkhead slides open with a hydraulic hiss. "How did you know that would work?" Elindra asks as they slip through. "Military systems always have emergency access protocols for first responders," Alex explains. "I studied the Academy's architecture in the archives. The designers would never create a fortress without contingency access. They encounter a group of senior students trapped in a research laboratory where containment fields have activated, separating individuals into isolated sections. The students, representing species with incompatible biologies, cannot communicate through the fields. The atmospheric stabilizers are failing," Elindra warns, reading displays through the transparent barriers. "Each section is optimized for different species. If they cross-contaminate." Alex doesn't hesitate, configuring the multi-tool into a universal interface that connects with the lab's environmental controls. "I can't override the containment fields without proper authorization, but I can stabilize the atmospheres within each section." Working methodically, Alex adjusts the environmental parameters for each containment area, ensuring breathable conditions for all trapped students. One section contains a silicon-based life form similar to Drock, struggling in the rapidly cooling environment. "It's Krell from Advanced Weapons Theory," Elindra identifies. "His species requires significant heat to maintain mobility." Alex reconfigures the tool yet again, creating a focused thermal emitter that raises the temperature in Krell's section without affecting the others. The crystalline student's movements become more fluid as warmth returns to his environment. "We need to keep moving," Elindra urges. "These are temporary fixes. Only the central hub can address the systemic failures." As they continue through increasingly damaged sections of the Academy, they encounter Professor Exaltus, geometric form partially destabilized from power fluctuations. "Human Chen," the professor's voice sounds distorted. "Your assessment prototype. You still have it. Alex displays the multi-tool. It's how we've been navigating the security lockdowns. Fascinating application. Xaltis manages geometric components struggling to maintain coherence. The Marshal. Command Center. Attempting manual override of the primary systems. Can you guide us there? Alex asks, noticing the professor's deteriorating condition. Follow. Energy conduits. Xaltis indicates faintly glowing lines running along the ceiling. But my form requires stabilization field. Without hesitation, Alex reconfigures the multi-tool into an energy harmonizer, projecting a field that helps Xaltis's geometric components maintain their proper relationship. The professor's form solidifies somewhat, though still clearly unstable. Why assist me? Xaltis asks. I represent the philosophy that dismissed your approach. Because right now, you're not a philosophy, Alex answers, supporting the professor as they follow the energy conduits. You're a person who needs help. The Academy's Great Hall has been transformed into a medical trade center in the aftermath of the crisis. Temporary beds hold injured students and faculty, while makeshift diagnostic equipment hums as medical staff of various species tend to the wounded. Alex moves between stations, the multi-tool configured as a universal diagnostic scanner that compensates for different biologies. Grand Marshal Frexkalter observes from the elevated command platform, his scales bearing new scorch marks from his efforts during the crisis. When Alex approaches, the Marshal's expression remains unreadable, but his scales shift to a more neutral coloration. The Concord representatives are quite interested in your device. Human, he says without preamble. 17 worlds have requested technical specifications already, despite Academy protocols regarding innovations developed within our walls. Alex glances at the multi-tool. It's not proprietary technology, Marshal. The principles behind it are centuries old on Earth. Yet no other species thought to apply them this way. Frexkalter notes, our specialists analyzed the device during your sleep cycle. They were puzzled by its mechanical simplicity. One called it elegant primitiveness. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the most reliable, Alex replies, especially when complex systems fail. The Marshal's scales ripple in what might be thoughtful consideration. Throughout my military career, I've commanded fleets with enough firepower to sterilize planets, yet during the crisis, those weapons became useless hunks of metal. His clawed hand gestures toward students recovering nearby, while a simple tool saved more lives than our entire arsenal could. Before Alex can respond, Zixmar approaches, his usually pristine exoskeleton bearing signs of damage. One manipulator limb hangs useless at his side, evidence of his efforts to clear debris from collapsed sections. The Arthropodian Collective wishes to extend formal recognition. He announces, mandibles clicking in ceremonial patterns. My Hivequeen has revoked my family's 7th-generation weapons designation and established a new classification, Adaptive Technology Specialist. His compound eyes fix on Alex. I am to be the first under your tutelage, if you consent. I'm honored, Alex says, genuinely surprised. But I'm still just a student myself. Not anymore, interjects Professor Xaltis, geometric form now stable thanks to repairs implemented based on Alex's emergency field. The Academic Council has voted. Your multi-tool innovation satisfies all requirements for graduation certification. There is precedent, exceptional achievements during crisis response. From across the hall, Elindra glides toward them, accompanied by representatives from several worlds Alex doesn't recognize. The Luminarite Conclave is proposing the Joint Research Initiative, she announces, her telepathic voice reaching them before she physically arrives. Combining our neural interface technology with your adaptive mechanics. Drock follows shortly behind, his crystalline mass casting prismatic light across the floor. The Silicon Confederation offers raw materials and manufacturing capacity, he rumbles. Our worlds have suffered resource depletion from weapons production for generations. Your approach requires significantly fewer rare elements. The Marshal makes a gesture that silences the growing crowd around Alex. The Academy has stood for 17 generations as the foremost developer of military technology in the Concord. Our philosophy has remained unchanging. The best defense is superior offensive capability. His scales shift to a color Alex hasn't seen before. Recent events suggest this philosophy may benefit from revaluation. He extends a ceremonial blade, handle first, toward Alex. Tradition dictates that exceptional innovations receive formal designation in our archives. What name would you give to this new paradigm you've introduced to our institution? Alex considers the question, looking around at the diverse species gathered, former rivals now united in a common interest. On Earth, we might call it constructive engineering, the philosophy that the greatest tools aren't those that destroy most efficiently, but those that provide the most options for solving problems. Vrex Coulter nods, scales shimmering with formal acknowledgement. Then so it shall be recorded in Academy history. The human Chen, founder of the constructive engineering discipline. 6 months later, the Academy's central courtyard bears little resemblance to its former militaristic austerity. Where weapon displays and battle dioramas once dominated, collaborative workstations now host mixed species teams developing technologies based on the principles of constructive engineering. Alex moves between these stations, offering guidance and asking questions that challenge assumptions. At one table, Zixmar leads a team developing medical technology that adapts to different biological systems. His manipulator limbs move with precise coordination as he demonstrates a diagnostic tool based on Alex's original multi-tool principles. The neural interface responds to thought patterns across 17 distinct brain structures. He explains to visiting dignitaries from the Concord. What once required specialized equipment for each species now functions universally through adaptive reconfiguration. Nearby, Elindra and a group of telepathic species work on communication technology that bridges gaps between radically different modes of consciousness. By applying constructive principles, we've developed interfaces that translate thought patterns without requiring standardization. She explains, her luminescence pulsing with enthusiasm. Alex pauses at a workstation where Drak and several silicon-based lifeforms collaborate with Oxygen Brothers on environmental technology. The atmospheric harmonizer can maintain multiple habitable zones within shared spaces. Drak rumbles proudly. No more species segregation due to incompatible biological needs. Grand Marshal Vrex Coulter approaches, his ceremonial armor replaced by more practical attire bearing the newly designed insignia of the Adaptive Technology Division. The Concord High Command has reviewed your curriculum proposal, he announces, handing Alex a data crystal. They've approved the expansion of constructive engineering into all 17 academy branches. Alex accepts the crystal with a nod of appreciation. And the weapons development programs continue alongside your initiative. The Marshal answers frankly. The galaxy remains a dangerous place. But for the first time in 7 generations, our resource allocation to non-combat technology exceeds military spending. His scales ripple with what Alex has learned to recognize as wry amusement. Some traditionalists remain displeased. Professor Exaltis joins them, geometric form now incorporating elements inspired by human design principles. Change comes slowly to institutions that have existed for millennia, the professor observes. Yet in just 6 months, your approach has influenced development paths across 17 worlds. The conversation pauses as Academy alarms chime, not the harsh warning of emergency, but the melodic announcement of arriving visitors. The main gates open to admit a shuttle bearing Earth insignia, the first official delegation since Alex's arrival. Your homeworld has sent representatives to discuss expanded exchange programs, Vrex Coulter explains. The Concord Council has expressed interest in human perspectives on other disciplines beyond engineering. As the Earth delegation disembarks, Alex notices a young woman among them, carrying what appears to be an artist's portfolio. Their eyes meet across the courtyard, mutual recognition of kindred spirits from a planet where adaptation and creativity have always been necessary for survival. It begins with engineering, Alex observes, but the principles apply everywhere. Art, diplomacy, ecology, seeing problems as opportunities for innovation rather than obstacles to overcome. Later that evening, Alex stands on the observation deck, watching the 3 moons rising above the Academy's transformed silhouette. Zix Mars skitters up to join the human, his exoskeleton gleaming with fresh ceremonial markings. "My Hive Queen asks when you will visit our homeworld," he says, mandibles clicking softly. "She wishes to establish a constructive engineering center within our primary hive complex." "Soon," Alex promises, gaze still fixed on the moons. "But first, there's something I need to build." Zixmar's compound eyes follow Alex's gesture toward the stars. "Another tool." Alex smiles. "A bridge. Between worlds, perspectives, philosophies." The multi-tool was just the beginning. A proof of concept. The real work is helping different species see beyond their specialized approaches to recognize complementary strengths. "A very human perspective," Zixmar observes. "Perhaps," Alex agrees, "but one the galaxy seems ready to embrace."